So we'll start off here with the basics, and you can find the main selection tools up here in this panel here, and that's going to be T is the hotkey to bring that up and down. So the very first one here is select. This is a rollout, a flyout, so you just hover over and hold it down. You see the little arrow. So select, from what I can gather, all previous versions to 2.80, 2.79x versions, this is the way it worked, where you just click to select. And I'll just bring out another tool, and then shift is to add to that selection. But if you started dragging, then this caught me out at first. Things started, didn't know what was going on, and I realised like you have to press B, and that's the shortcut for box select, which is the next tool down on the list. So that was the old way of doing it, I think, anyway, from what I can gather. You'd press B every time you wanted to use it, and it was a one-time use. And see, then I dragged and it started moving, so you'd have to press B every time then you wanted to use it. So 2.80 has introduced select box as a mode then, so it just works as you'd expect. With marquee selection and max, you still can just click, and shift is universal in Blender. It's a toggle between select and deselect. The way we used to have it in Max, with I think control was a toggle, but whatever, in the last couple of years the alt now is the deselect. But anyway, I'm just going to open the flyout, and these other two, circle select and select lasso, I've never used them from this panel here. I always have select box active here, and you can see it up here as well in the tools on workspace panel here. Whatever tool you have over here will show up here. So as I said, I always have box select or select box active, because these are the ones you can just activate them. Circle select, which is like paint select and max, you just press C, and then the mouse wheel just makes it bigger and smaller. But you'll also see that it doesn't show up over here, but that doesn't matter, I'd never really look up there anyway. And then right click to end the tool, and then lasso, instead of activating it up here, you can just hold control down and right click then is lasso. But I rarely use that myself either, but that's how to use them without activating them here. And you'll also see down at the bottom here, you box select there left, and then if I hold control down, you can see down here lasso select is after appearing over there. So that's pretty much, that's the basics. Select all is you just press A, and then I have it set so you just press A to select, A to deselect. Default is A to select and double A. But if you go into edit preferences and key map, you'll see here that select all toggles. You can see there what the tooltip says, just activate that. It's just easier for me to just press A and then A again instead of the double A. I think that's the way it worked in older Blender as well. So that's pretty much the selection basics. So just like Max's layer and scene explorers, you can also select up here in the outliner. So I'll just shift A, duplicate that, and you can see then you can just add to your selection the same with that with the shift, and that's the same working as a toggle, just like I showed in object mode. So just get rid of that one, and you also have this select rollout here, and that's context sensitive, just like all other Blender menus. So it'll change between object and edit mode, and I'll go over some of these when I show edit mode. So press tab to go into edit mode. Modo has a very unique method of, or system of working with sub-object selection, as we know in Max. So verts, edge, faces. There's no border or element mode, but I'll show element mode equivalent in a while. So as I say, it's quite unique in the sense that it's a single mode rather than Max. You switch between all the modes. In Modo, edit mode is a single mode, and then the verts, edges and faces can be switched between in a sub mode to sort of specifically work on those sub objects. So I'll show you what I mean. So select the vertex here, you can see that we get this sort of fall off, gradient fall off, and that's spanning out halfway to these next verts here. which means that it's connected. So if I select another one with shift clicking, you'll see now that the edge between them is highlighted, because both of these are connected by that edge. So now we can actually work on the edge as well as the verts. So if I press E to extrude, you'll see that it's actually extruded a face, which is obviously strange for a Max user. Like, that's completely illegal for starters, topology wise, and also to be able to extrude an edge from selected verts is pretty alien to Max users and even users of other 3D packages. As I said, this is unique, this hybrid system. So if I select the 4 verts, you can see now obviously they're connected and the face has been selected now, and then you can still see this fall off gradient. So if I select that vert, you'll see the edge has been added, and then this one will complete the 4 edges and 4 verts, which selects the face. So this might seem a bit strange at first, but it's actually pretty great, because you don't have to keep switching between sub-object modes all the time. You can work obviously for certain operations you have to go into the different sub-objects specifically for those operations, but for a lot of sort of things you can you can just stay in vert mode, press I to inset, E to extrude, sorry I pressed R there, E to extrude, and we're still in vert mode, and I can press 3 then to switch into face mode, and essentially just do the same thing, I to inset, E to extrude. So that's basically the way it works, and just like anything, you know, when you're coming from Max, it's a bit sort of unusual at first, but it's actually pretty great. And the weird illegal topology creation in Modo is actually very useful. Like, you can just grab a vert and press E, or if I was using a spline or curve in Modo, like a spline in Max, you can grab a knot or a spline knot or a vertex and just press E and extrude that out. So that would actually be a lovely feature to have in Max, if you could just extrude the end of splines out. So that's basically how it works with the hybrid mode, and once you get used to it, as I say, it's pretty useful. So say for instance, even if I were to select these 4 verts, and that makes the edge, and then shift and then control, it's going to select the faces in the center, because obviously the verts are connected here by these edges. Whereas if I press 2 to go into edge mode and do the same thing, shift and then control, I've selected the edges now, but obviously these edges aren't selected, so it doesn't connect them up, and the faces won't be selected. So it can be quite useful when you get used to how it works. So in that case, you know, I could be in edge mode there and not select them, or I can be in vert mode and just select the two the same edges, but also be connected, and then have the faces selected and ready to extrude or do whatever. So a few things to know. Number one, coming from Max, you can't convert selections the way you can in Max, where, you know, if you have vert selected or a face or whatever, and then you control click on the command panel on the sub-object icon, it'll switch over. So unfortunately we don't have that in Blender. And also something that's really good in Max that isn't in Blender is you know, the sticky memory that the sub-object modes have. So, you know, if you have these verts selected, then you go into edge mode, and these are still selected, whereas in Max, whatever edges you had selected, so if I had these edges selected over here and then I went back to vert mode, these ones would still be selected. But in Blender now, because of the way the hybrid mode works, unfortunately we don't have that feature. But Maxi Vasquez, the bloke that did the interactive tools plugin or script there for Max, is ported that to Blender, and he's actually working on a way to implement this kind of sticky memory sub-object. So hopefully he gets that sorted. Another interesting thing as well is that in Blender you don't have to be, like, you can be here and it'll just select the closest vertex or edge, depending on where your mouse is in screen space, and Blender has a couple of features that work like this in screen space, raycasting or whatever, that's really nice, as opposed to in Max the way you have to sort of nearly be right on top of it to select. It can be a bit more loose in Blender and not have to be as accurate, which is nice to have. And lastly, something to note that might be strange as well coming from Max is that there isn't really an ignore back facing toggle the same way there is in Max. I think in 279X there was it was called limit selection to visible, but that's not in 2.80 anymore. This is here instead. I think show whole scene transparent, but from what I can gather it doesn't, well, definitely doesn't work the same way. So what you have to do in Blender is I'm just going to snap into an ortho view here. So if I just marquee select these verts, you can see weird sort of overlapping shading here, and if I tumble around you'll see that it hasn't selected any back facing. So what you have to do is go into this mode up here, and the hotkey there is Shift Z, and now if I select, it will select. So you just have to remember that in order to select back facing you must go into that mode, which is essentially wireframe. So, but it's not too bad once you get used to it. Just Shift Z anytime I want to make those back face selections, and it actually can be quite handy because you can still be working you know, in a 3D perspective mode or orthographic mode and make selections without worrying about, you know, in Max sometimes you have to angle the model knowing that you're not going to hit any back facing, or you know, you might always be tumbling around making sure you didn't. So at least in Blender here, you know, that's the bonus there, is you don't have to do that because you know that it's not going to select them. So I actually like this, and I would probably prefer if it were the case in Max, because we've had a long sort of standing issue with ignore back facing. It used to be ropey over the years, so I just avoided it, and still to this day I do. I don't know, it might be fixed now, but I don't even use it because I'm just in the habit of not using it. So that's how that works with your ignore back facing. So we'll go over this context sensitive select menu here now that we're in edit mode. So you can see there Alt A, select none. I think that's changed again, that double A, but that was what I was talking about earlier on in the settings preferences. Just set, I have A just set to all, select all and deselect all. It's a toggle basically. Then invert selection, didn't mention that. Yeah, so Control I, same as Max. Select random, you know, the name says it all, but I would never really use that for an checker deselect. Is like, it's like an every other type of thing. That's we have that in the graphite modeling tools. So if I select this edge loop or vert loop or hybrid loop as it is in Blender, and then go up to select, checker deselect, it'll just select every other, and then the model will pop up, and you can change the settings then before you commit by clicking off, and then the model disappears. So that's checker select, checker deselect. Can't remember what it's called in graphite, but it's not step loop. I can't remember what it's called. Select sharp edges, and we'll just select all your hard edges basically. And when I do a video on smoothing groups and hard soft edges, I'll definitely show that. Select similar is like in Max, same graphite tools, and you have your options there, and that'll be a model as well. Same with select by trait. You select different traits here of the geometry. Select more and less, that's just like grow and shrink. And then next active is like the loop and ring up and down arrow tools in Max in the command panel. So they're the hotkeys there. Control plus and minus for grow. So if I just select that vert and then control plus, it's going to grow, and then minus will shrink. And then for that other one there that I showed, this one here, next active and previous active, it's shift control. You have to just select a pair, so if I select those two, knows which way to go, and then shift control and plus will just move all the way around. You can just keep pressing, and similarly you can go backwards then. So I think there's a tool like that in Moto, and as I say, the same one in Max, the arrows on the loop and ring and the command panel. So shortest path is the same as step loop and graphite and Max, and that the hotkey is just control, so it's just going to follow your mouse around. And also in later versions of Max you have that shift tool where you hold down shift, and it's almost like a hybrid between this shortest path and a paint kind of tool. And this also works then obviously in edges as well. And you can see this is a modal here, so if I go back to verts and I select these two verts with pick shortest path, and then I just say fill region, it'll select all those faces. And if you're wondering why this is a different color, I don't know if I went over this, and so is this one here. This means that that's your active, and that's I'll show that in a modeling video where you actually use it for certain things, your active element. I won't digress too much about it here, but it's basically the last thing selected. So if I just shift click to toggle this, that's going to be active. Same with any of those. So anyway, that fill region that I showed in the model there, you can also just hold control and shift as the hotkey, and that'll do the same thing as just as activating this. And then you have your other options there as well. So that's shortest path is just control, and then for that fill region, it's not going to work in this case. You just hold control shift, and you know, you can do the same there in face mode where fill region is active there. As I mentioned earlier on, there's no element mode. Obviously we've only got verts, edges and faces, but to select an element, you just hover over in screen space with the mouse and just press L, and that's select linked, and that just means it's linked by, you can select it whether it's linked by UV islands, sharp edges, hard edges, UV seams, material, or just linked. And then linked are also instances in Moto, which I think I showed in a previous video. So I can just control D, duplicate that, and again, and now these are, I'm still in edit mode when I duplicated that. So just like in Max, when you shift drag and then you keep them as an element within the same mesh, it's the same thing here. So I can just hold L, and then it's going to select. I don't even have to press anything else, so press A to deselect. Hover over an element, press L, and I don't even have to hold shift around. I can just keep tapping L, and that becomes additive then. So I'll just L to select them, and then just get rid of them. So that's basically how you do edit mode, element mode selection. So selecting rings and loops, by default it's Alt left click. Because I'm using Maya navigation, I just have it set to double click, and if you just go into the key map, you can search using a string, and you can just search for loop or select, and then you'll see where you can change that. So actually I'll just show quickly here. So in the key map, and then I can just type loop, and there's loop select, and double left mouse, and then to add to it, you just hold down shift and alt and then click once. So if I double click, just like a maximum face mode here, it's also using the screen space. You know, by using Max, this is wonky, this kind of selection in Max. It just sort of sometimes randomly picks a button. Blender, it's detecting, like in ZBrush it's the same, it's detecting which edge you're closest to. So I'm just going to go back to edge mode, double click, and then I can just hold down shift alt and click once, and that will add to it. And then, you know, I can add depending on where I'm clicking in screen space, and you can see here now the hybrid mode thing in action again there, where all these verts and edges are connected to select that face. So I'll just go over that once more. So I have it set to double click, so double click and then shift alt will add to that, and then I can just keep adding to it. I'll go into 3 to go into face mode, and you can do the same, double click, and you can see depending on where I double click, it's going to select based on the screen space, raycasting, and then you can do that. You can add the same there. So it's toggling with shift, and it's deselecting that first and then selecting the entire loop, so you can just sort of nearly double click that, and that works exactly the same. Double click, and you can see with vert you can just go beside it on the edge and it'll respect the screen space detection. And it's the same thing, then it's going to just select depending on where your mouse is, and it's a nice system there altogether. And once you understand, or not understand, but once you become familiar with the hybrid mode, you know, you'll see how quick you can do these selections. And I think that's pretty much it. I've more or less covered everything. The basics, we've covered loop and ring selections. Actually I didn't cover ring selections now that I think about it, and the hotkey for that, so I'm just going to go into edge mode. Control Alt Shift is for ring selections, and because you're holding down shift already, you can just toggle those selections on or off. So that's all three, Control Alt Shift, and I'm pretty sure now that's all the selection basics. So I hope this one was helpful, and thanks for the positive comments on these vids I've put up, and yeah, looking forward to doing more of them and go into some more varied stuff, just covering all the basics, I suppose. Alright then, cheers, thanks, good luck.